Hey homies, what's up? Roblox Critical here. Today we're going to be talking about the top 12 Roblox SCP games for 2021. Woohoo, scary. But as always, question time. From what anonymous image-based forum did the SCP copypasta come from? Get the correct answer and get your comment liked and pinned. Area 47. Welcome to Area 47, an underground facility that contains anomalous objects, all those that defy laws of human nature. While the game has similar elements as other roleplay games, this has the same formula as the previous games I've mentioned earlier. You can play as a scientist, security, or be a member of Chaos Insurgency who seeks to destroy the Foundation, raid, protect the facility, or roam around the sewers. SCP Breach. SCP Breach is a horror FPS game, and that means you may experience jump scares and spookage fest. Play at your own risk. The game itself features various roles and jobs, as well as objectives that are either to escape or to kill. Pretty simple, right? SCP Roleplay. SCP Roleplay is a role-playing game, not the RPG role-playing, it's role-playing. You can choose between a wide selection of characters of your favorite SPF roles. We got Class D prisoners, scientists, security, Chaos Insurgents, administrative, internal security, and many more. The game features various guns here, like the M4, Glock, and more. Be mindful of the SCP creatures though, because they can kill people. For me, the prison is pretty neat and the design is quite likable. There are multiple quests here that you can finish as well. SCP-F Site Delta. Site Delta is the same thing with other SCP games. This game has one goal as well, which is to secure anomalies and SCP creatures. As you've already noticed, this is another role-playing game with a pretty detailed architecture, especially for the details of the buildings and such. All content is derived from the SCP website, and the mechanics are pretty much the same from other SCP games that I've mentioned earlier. SCP Containment Breach Obby. This game is pretty much an obstacle course and a maze-like game mixed with sci-fi and horror. The objective is simple: just survive and pass by the bizarre creatures and do your best to reach the end. Site-006. A pretty casual SCP game, Site-006 boasts a lot of departments in which you can enlist yourself in. For example, there's a Department of Operations, Site Overwatch, Sec Corps, and Crazies. There's a lot of access to guns, morphs, and clothing too. Pretty nice game, honestly. SCP Site Roleplay. SCP Site Roleplay is a similar and a copy of the previous game that I've mentioned, SCP Roleplay. This time around though, you're situated in a small containment facility. The objectives are pretty much the same as any other SCP games, but it's just a variation of what to do in this game. Become SCP Shy Guy. Pretty much just like SCP-096 demonstration, you're going to be the Shy Guy, and you're not going to shy away from killing everyone and haunting them to death. Shy Guy will be the prime antagonist in this game. Basically, you are in a maze. Shy Guy is roaming to hunt you cowards. There's no exit in the game, so all you gotta do is run. The maze is randomly generated and can be a bit crazy, especially for first-timers. SCP Tycoon. Basically, you're going to be building the best SCP foundation ever in this dropper-based SCP Tycoon game. The base is pretty big, and since you're going to be building an SCP facility, it's just right for it to be big enough to host a lot of weird creatures. Site-76 Prison Anomalies. This is Site-76 Prison Anomalies, an SCP-inspired secret prison compound. You'll be responsible for containing both inmates as well as exotic anomaly individuals, creatures, and etc. As for the roles, you can play the Foundation member, where you have to keep the facility functional, arrest prisoners seeking to escape, or even monsters. Every role has particular roles, like as in Foundation member. You can be a scientist, staff, overseer, site director, security, task force, and much more. The game features tasks that you need to fulfill for Roblox badges. You can also change or customize your name using the /name command. SCP Demonstration Facility Site 101. SCP Demonstration Facility Site 101 is another SCP game, but in here you can experience zombie outbreaks, SCP-008, SCP-173, and the horrifying shy guy known as SCP-096. There's also Burning Man, Alligator, Lizard, Mask, and Plague Doctor as SCP-049. Old Guy, or SCP-106, Healing Slime, Claw Monster, and much more. There's so many, I can't name them all. In short, there are various SCP creatures here. You can play as the Classic D Prisoner, Chaos of Insurgency, and Security Department. This one is like Prisoner versus Security versus Criminals versus, well, that's all. And not that much objectives, but a fun game. There's also various weapons here too for the security to use. The fun thing about this game is you can kill people randomly, but for the most part, it's a role-playing game. SCP Anomaly Breach. SCP Anomaly Breach is a survival game where you have to do multiple objectives so you can escape the facility. The game is really scary. I swear to God, don't play it if you're a chicken. Some of the game features include over 20 plus SCP creatures in the game that roam and kill people. It's always wise to be very careful, but you can always utilize the game's weapons and items to navigate your way into it. Well, that's it for now. Smash the like button, bros, and don't forget to comment on the answer for this week's question to get yourself liked and pinned. Again, this is Roblox Critical, and we'll see you guys in the next video.